What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. Today, I want to talk more about this pretendian situation because it's like a corrupt file that's being downloaded into the ether and it's being downloaded into the brains of our community as they try to figure out who they are and where they come from. Okay, and the way it usually starts out is you'll get some African American, right? Even if they have good intentions, they may be defending themselves from somebody that's trying to take something from us or whatnot. But they'll say a lot of good things, and I'll be listening, I'll be agreeing with them, and they'll throw in there somehow this corrupt file of, and we were also here before white people. We were here, we were the natives, indigenous population. There's all kinds of ways that people say this. And every time they do this, every single time they do this, it discredits every single thing that they say before and after, no matter what they were saying. And most of the times they're saying a lot of truths. When they throw this corrupt file in there, it just ruins everything that they're saying. And I can't even share the information because I'm like, nope, because I can't spread this amongst my people, because now people are just saying it with zero evidence. And with all history that we have in this country, with all the history that's already been laid out that we know of, that's in fact factual, right? It just blows my mind that we have all these African Americans who just insist that we were here before Europeans, right? As far as a population is concerned. Now, listen, I'm going to try to say this as simple as possible because I'm a historian, right? And a lot of you guys taking a lot of liberties when it comes to this, including a lot of grifters who want to take advantage of those ignorants among us who insist that we were here before thousands of years before any Europeans came here, simply because of some anecdotal coincidences of the past. Now, this is the truth. We're going to start off with the truth. Your grandmama had a 6th grade education. Your grandmama was taken advantage of by a white man. Your grandmama was embarrassed that she was taken advantage by a white man, so she told you she was half Native American. And in fact, she's black and white. She's a mixed mulatto. Mixed mulattoes have been pretending like they have been Native Americans for hundreds of years in this country because of the shame of being great by that white man who took advantage of us without any accountability for hundreds of years. That's the truth. The other truth of the matter is, yes, there was a West African king called Mansa Musa who took thousands of ships or thousands of people to the Western Hemisphere. What you need to understand is, even if that's the case, even if it actually happened, he would have ended up in South America. And if he took thousands of ships, he would have had maybe thousands of sailors or military personnel. He would have landed in South America. Listen, South, not North America, South America. And even if he landed it safely in South America and he couldn't get back and he stayed there, which is not true, because where the corridor between Africa, West Africa and South America, there's a river. There's like a 495 highway right within the ocean that will take you from Africa to South America and from South America back to Africa. Okay, so you don't even need sails to go back and forth from Africa to South America. But that's South America, not North America. South America is pretty far away from North America. Now, even if Mansa Musa made it there with his thousands of most likely men and maybe a few concubines, but most likely men, they would have made it to South America and they would have either traded with the native population. They would have set up camps and they would have had to live there, and they would have been metastasized within the native population of that landmass, right? And that should show up in DNA evidence. But due to the fact that you have the transatlantic slave trade, there's no way for us to know, because obviously Europeans, Portuguese, and the Spaniards brought Africans from West Africa 100 years later. Let's assuming that he didn't make it there. And so that DNA would have been washed because it would have been mixed up with the regular, the Africans that came afterwards during transatlantic slave trade. But even if Mansa Musa made it to South America, okay, South America, the population would have not been large enough to create any significant African population with an African identity, for any significant amount of time. That's the truth. Another example is the Vikings made it here before the Anglo-Saxon barbarians. The Vikings made it to Canada. They also sailed to the Western Hemisphere, right? And when they landed, they encountered the Native Americans. Sometimes they traded, sometimes they warred, but at some point they had to leave because it was just a hostile situation. Just because those Vikings made it to Canada doesn't mean any Europeans there are native populations of the land. It just means there are some remnants of former European travelers who made it to the Canada. That's all that means. That doesn't mean there was a significant nation or tribe built by these Europeans. Same way with African people. Now, for all you people who say that we were here for, you're just saying it because the reason why y'all saying it because you're trying to prove that African people had the capability of sailing because Europeans has told us that we couldn't sail, that we weren't nothing. We weren't shit. We couldn't swim. We couldn't do anything. So the counterbalance to that, anytime we have an opportunity to say we did something before them, we do it, right? And sometimes we don't even use evidence. We just say it because it sounds good to us. It sounds good to say African people sailed from Africa all the way to the Americas and established a population before white people because we want to one-up those white people. That is the truth. That's why people just say it with zero evidence. You have no evidence. You can't say that you're an indigenous population and act like there were not people here already that would have had records of it. There are already Native Americans that were here. If there was an indigenous population of Africans, the Native Americans would have known about it. They would have warred with them. They would have traded with them. They would have had records of them. There is no record of these people. Also, last time I checked, the most of the world is brown and melanated. So from the perspective of a European, my skin tone and darker would be black, Negro, would be dark. That's what they would call you. Native Americans have different types of skin tone types. Some are lighter than others. Some are darker than others. The problem is you guys have everything backwards. You concentrate on the fantasy of saying that all these Africans sailed all the way to the Americas, but you never took into consideration, why do people sail? Why do people go places? People sail because they need resources. People do that because they need something that they don't have. Africans had absolutely no need to get in the water and risk their lives sailing into the unknown to look for a greener pasture when they have the greenest pastures on the planet. You have immigration and migration going the wrong direction. Usually, you walk towards where you migrate. Walk towards patterns of migration of animals. African people follow the migration of animals. We followed our food out of Africa. The migration of Africans came via out of Africa into the Arabian Peninsula, into West Asia, into South and East Asia, over the Bering Strait through Alaska, around Canada, down to North America, down to Central America, into South America. There was also a population that went to the Polynesian Australian Islands, and they sailed to the Hawaiian Islands. They sailed to the Pacific side of South America. There is genetic evidence that the Polynesians and Melanesians made it to South America. There is genetic evidence in Chile of the last remaining population of those very few Polynesians that made it to South America. Now, did African people sail and make it to South America? I believe so. I believe there's evidence that we made it, but we was there as explorers and we didn't make any significant population. But what we need to do is stop just saying it without any evidence. We can't just say the Olmec heads look African, so therefore they're African. That's not necessarily true. Now, we don't know it not to be true, but we don't know it to be true. Because here's the thing, we are African. We are the blueprint. Therefore, people look like us. It's not out of the realms of possibilities that the people who made it finally to South America still had African phenotypical phenotypes. Look at our nose. Southeast Asians have our nose. Southeast Asians have our cheekbones. They have a lot of our features. If you pay attention, you can see with the migration. You see in Southeast Asia, you see all the Africoid looking people. All the people, the first groups to leave Africa to migrate through the migratory patterns of animals, following the coastline and fishing. You can see it. There is DNA evidence showing our migratory patterns out. You're going the wrong direction because you just want to prove that you sailed before white people. That is true. We did sail before white people. We did have boats. Before the desertification, there was a humongous river in the middle, humongous lake in the middle of Africa. It was like a sea. It was bigger than the Great Lakes. There was massive populations around there. We are, in fact, sailors. Through that desert, there was rivers and corridors that reached all the way from northeast Africa all the way to West Africa. And another thing, West Africa is all of West Africa. That north part, there's a western portion of that too. The Egyptians has record, the Egyptian Empire, or the Kemetic Empire, went from East Africa to West Africa. That entire empire which consisted of many of different kingdoms with many of different people who had many of different languages. They traded with each other. There was rivers that you could not see now because it's covered by desert, because of the cycle of the planet in which it does that place that we see this there. It desertificates every now and then, right? And then it goes back to green. At one point, it was green. When you envision Egypt, you're still looking at sand. You still got sand in your mind. Those were green pastures. It was green like the Serengeti. They had jungles, and it was very lush. All right. Only later did it become that desert that we have edged in our head of some fictitious group of people that apparently nobody knows who they are, even though they told you who they are. They told you where they come from. They came from Inner Africa. These were black people. Majority of the world were black people or black adjacent until just recently. Europeans are the only aberration, and Han Chinese are the only aberration. Even if you look all the way up in the North Pole, you have those group of people that have been circumnavigating the north portion of the planet. A lot of them are also brown. A lot of Eskimos are brown, browner than me. So losing your melanin doesn't necessarily, going into the cold doesn't necessarily mean you lose your melanin. We're now figuring out the Europeans, and they get a lot of their features from their ancestors, which were those Neanderthals. Okay. They are just now coming into enlightenment of themselves and who they are. But while they were doing that, they were stealing a lot of shit, and they were abusing all the native populations of the world, stealing and manipulating them. Therefore, because we suffer from post-traumatic slave syndrome, we try to do anything to bolster our group self-esteem. That's why we say, oh, we sailed from Africa to the Americas. Yes, like I said, I'm sure we did. I'm sure there was some fishing boats that accidentally ended up on that river in the Atlantic Ocean, and it pulled them towards North America. I'm sure it happened thousands of times. Over hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe over thousands of years, it's happened several times. I'm sure there was some eager explorer that didn't mind dying just to figure out what was on the horizon. It happens. But that does not mean there was a significant African population that grew to the size of nations. Because if that was the case, there would be lots of evidence to prove so, as we are builders. Now, did we build those Olmec heads? I don't know. But even if we did it, we obviously went home or we disappeared. So the African people that is now in North America has nothing to do with those Africans that made it to South America. South America. We have nothing to do with those Africans other than our shared history and our shared geographical origins. Every single African American, every single Afro-Latino, every single one of us comes from West Africa recently. None of us was here before the European. Europeans and us came at the same time. You say, where are the ships? Okay, well, how did white people get here? You know those ships were made of wood. Do you understand anything about history? Where's all the pirate ships? They were made of wood. You know what they did with the ships? Let me educate you what they did with all of those ships. They decommissioned them and they broke them down, used them for scraps to build communities. That's what they did. Because it was already cured wood. It was already pre-treated wood. It's the perfect thing to use to build a community. You have plenty of wood, it's already cut, it's already shaped out. You're making houses, you're living. That's what they did. The same thing they do to ships now when they get decommissioned, because they're made of metal. They break them apart and use them as scrap metal to make buildings, to make various other products. That is the truth. We have to get rid of this false file that we have, that we were here. We were not, stop adding, we were here before the white, we were not here before the white people. Every single African American, every single Latino, Afro-Latino, every single Afro-Caribbean, every single Afro-Brazilian, every single one of us, all of us originate in West Africa, and we all got here the same way on the white European ships. Every single, none of us are part of any fictitious indigenous population. Now, when it comes to Indians and African American mix, there were cases where African and Indians mixed. You got to understand there is a history that is not taught in our schools. The closest thing we can get to the history is some movies that are able to be made by various different producers. Like if you look at Sinners was a good representation of how things looked back then, right? There are a lot of movies that have a good representation of how things looked back then, how the social dynamics were back then. The Cherokee, one of the great nations, consisted of multiple tribes. They were a nation. They were a nation at war with other nations of Indians. There were many Indians who were previously at war with each other before the Europeans came and exacerbated by giving them guns and horses so they can kill each other even further. Many French were allied with certain nations, while the English was allied with other nations, while the Dutch was allied with other nations, and various Europeans had different agreements with various different Native American nations in order to procure resources, right, and to fight other Europeans via other nations fighting each other. The same way you see America using proxies to fight their wars. As a United States Marine, my job in Afghanistan was also to train militias to fight people we didn't like on behalf. As you had Russia also training other various militias within the country to fight us. War is complicated. You create allies because y'all have interests. That's what happened in Europe. That's what happened in Africa. Different European nations allied with different African nations that we now call tribes, and they allied with them in order to fight against other Europeans and other Africans who were allied with them. It wasn't just something as simple as Europeans coming in and just bogarting all the Africans collectively. No, this was complicated diplomatic politics and trade going on over hundreds of years. You got to imagine this happening over hundreds of years. This wasn't something that just happened over a couple years. It wasn't something that just happened over a decade. We're talking about hundreds of years, generations upon generations of treaties, of different governments, of interests. Europeans were fighting each other, and they needed to finance their wars in Europe. They needed to finance their expansionism in Europe. They need to finance their development in Europe. How did they do that? By gallivanting around the world, making allies with different indigenous groups in order to undermine other groups who are also allied with their enemy European nations. That's real history. Okay? So we have to educate ourselves and stop just repeating falsities. Because what we're doing is we're disrespecting the native population of this land that had great nations before Europeans came. You're under the impression that Native Americans were just running around in loincloth and having feathers around their head, going to war with each other and living in teepees, not understanding these great nations had cities, advanced cities and roads and advanced government systems. Those warriors in teepees with feathers, those were ceremonial dresses. When you wear one of those, when you see these African Americans disrespecting the Native Americans by wearing the headdress, that's the ultimate sign of disrespect, because you have to earn those feathers. That's a warrior thing. You have to earn that. So every time you order a daggone feather hat from Timo or Amazon, you put that on your head, calling yourself some fictitious group of Native Americans that you have zero evidence other than your grandmama who had a 6th grade education and didn't want to admit that she or her mama was raped by a white man who took advantage of. Because we know what white men do. If you're not paying attention right now, we know what white men like to do for fun, especially rich white men. And it's not a new thing. This is part of their culture. This is what they did. The transatlantic slave trade was sexual exploitation. Was sexual trafficking. And they were not just sexually abusing women. They were sexually abusing men as they do it now. Boys, girls, boys, children, 14, 12, 9. That's what these evil, savage, barbarian Neanderthals like. And they've been doing it. They was doing it then and they're doing it now. So we have to just be smarter and use more of our brains. We have enough history. We have enough rich history. We don't have to steal somebody else's history. We have enough rich history and enough evidence to that history where we don't have to make up fictitious things to try to get one up on a white man. Yes, we sailed the world. We also populated the world. We walked everywhere in this world. We are the ones who populated this planet and created all these groups that now have races that we call races because they particularly specialize in the geographical area that they ended up in and they stayed. Black people, our body frames, we can adapt to any place in the world. We have the ultimate frame. We don't have to, we specialize in everything. That's what makes us special. That's why no matter where we go around the world, we can excel in anything, in any terrain, in any climate, including cold climate. But a lot of these other groups, they specialize in certain climates. Asians specialize in that Pacific area, that Asian climate. Europeans specialize in that cold climate. They specialize in that. But even when you have specialties, right, that doesn't mean that you can survive everywhere. I.e., that's why Europeans, no matter where they went, they could never do the work. They always had to get somebody else to do it because they could not do the work. Their bodies are not meant to do the work. So they have to get others to do the work. You understand? And that, in fact, is the truth. So there's just, and here's another thing. If you like feathers, you need to tap into your African history, your West African history. We wore feathers too, and we had reasons for our feathers, right? So if you like getting dressed up and dancing around, we did that too. Everybody got that from us. There's nothing you can find in any other group of people to try to boost your ego, to boost your self-esteem that you can't find in West Africa, that you can't find in Central Africa. There's absolutely nothing. You just have to get it out of your head that Africa, is someplace to shun. It's sad that we have a group of people who are running away from who they are. It's sad that we have a group of people that are ashamed, still in this day of age with all the information, still ashamed to be black, still ashamed to be 100% African. And for all you pretendians, how can you neglect your African heritage, which is basically 90% of you, while pretending like that European heritage, which is 12 to 4% of you, right? While pretending to be the 0.1% in you that some of you have, and most of you don't. That doesn't make any sense. And the fact that you guys are running around pretending to be something that you're not takes away from those African Americans who are in fact part Native American, because they do exist. But now they're being mired by all you pretendians. So now they're getting lumped up with you guys. So anytime you see an African American that say I'm part Native American, no one believes them, because it's bullshit as far as everyone's concerned. Because of how regular African Americans who have absolutely no Native American in at all, none, all they have is a mixed mulatto grandmama or great grandmama that got, like I said, molested by a white man, right? And because of self-loathing and because of the embarrassment and the shame, they just said, because they didn't want to be associated with any white men, they said they were Native American because it just sounded better, because it made sense, because they was a little lighter and their hair was C3 or C2 instead of, that super curly. They had to justify why their hair was curly. They had to justify why they had a narrow nose. It wasn't as plump and West African-esque in its phenotypical look. They had to justify why their lips wasn't as full. They had to justify all that stuff. So that's why they say Native American. It has nothing to do with anything that these people are talking about right now. There's not many African Americans who can prove genetically or through their genealogy that they have any Native American. They just say it, and anytime they have an opportunity to prove it, they don't, because they don't want the truth to go against what they want to believe, because of their self-loathing, because they're afraid of the truth. You don't have to be afraid of the truth. If you are an African American, you are part of the greatest group of people to ever grace this planet. You are the original. You are the aboriginal of the planet. You are the indigenous population of the planet. You are the blueprint of all humanity. There is no greater honor. So you don't have to steal from others. You do not. And I'm just getting sick and tired of the most blackest looking person talking about, and they'll say, yeah, we did this, we did that, we did it. And then here they'll add that corrupt file. And we was here before. No, we were not. No, we were not. With prejudice. No, we were not. We are West African. We are Central African. And we only been over here for about 500 years. Any other black person that made it over here came hundreds of years before, and they already metastasized inside of the local population, and their genetics is already gone because it's already been mixed up with other Africans that came with us together. And if you are Caribbean, if you are a North American African, if you are a South American African, we all come from the exact same tribes. We are the same. Water does not define who we are. Just like the dirt between us doesn't define who we are. Just because I'm in DC and there's a black man from Florida, there's no difference between me and him, even though their culture may be slightly different because of how they grew up. We are in fact genetically the same. Just like that black man from Florida and them Jamaicans are the same. That black man from Louisiana and that black man from Trinidad, they are the same. That black man in Haiti and that black man in New York, they are the same. We are the same. We can't allow these European false lines to define who we are. And we're still fighting over lines that we didn't draw. Do you understand what I'm saying? We fight over the lines we didn't draw. We define ourselves based off European lines. And that is one of the chains we need to break that's in our head. The war is not on the ground. The war is in the mind. That's what we're all fighting it. We're fighting this war in the mind. So we need to win this battle. We don't need to add anything to our great history. We are West African and Central Africans who came over here during the transatlantic slave trade. Nothing less. And we were never slaves. We were enslaved. Let me say that again. There's never been an African slave. There's only been Africans that were enslaved. Okay? Anyway, you guys tell me what you think in the comment section. It's Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach something. I'm out.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such an extent that you bleach? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Free Sudan, boycott diamonds and gold. Free Sudan, boycott diamonds and gold. We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan.
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.